Thank you all for joining us. If you just popped on for our 2 o'clock session, this is a friendly reminder for participants to type your questions in the chat at the end of the session. And our media specialist, Jason Harper, will read the questions off to the presenters, in the order they are received. Next up, it is with great pleasure I introduce you to Darlena Potter, State Public Records Ombudsman for Transparency in Action, the Wyoming Public Record Act, and Leslie Zimmerschied will also be on hand for any questions regarding FERPA. Thank you so much, ladies.
I just want to thank you all for having me. I hope that you all find the information useful. I guess before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to everything we go over today is going to be a little bit of a situation by situation kind of ultimate outcome, specifically when you go more so to the FERPA version of things. So I'm trying to give you a general understanding of how everything works together and what that looks like. So please bear with me, and probably you're going to have a dozen or more questions after we get done with this. You can always follow up with me afterwards, but I wanted to just let you know that this isn't going to answer every single burning question on your mind, because quite frankly, law is generally a little bit in the gray. And so we all know how that is. So with that, I will go ahead and get started here. Welcome all. And let's see here. Okay. Can you all see that? Or not? Okay.
We can't see it yet, but if you want to try again, and we'll help you on this end.
That sounds great. Let's see here. Okay. I have too many screens open, so I do apologize.
That's no worries. It happens to all of us. It's a busy schedule that you have, and we appreciate you hopping on.
Okay.
Looks like we can see it now. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Is it big enough for everybody, or as big as I could make it anyway? Okay.
Are you able to go into presentation mode?
I am. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Is that better?
Let's see. It looks like, trying to read on this end, I'm trying to look if there's, on my screen, I see your main screen, but I also see the next slide.
Oh dear. Okay.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are most welcome. Okay, so bear with me. I don't do many of these Zoom versions anymore of training. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the Wyoming Public Records Act. I do want you to know that that is, of course, also referred to as the Sunshine Laws. Those are in statute 16401 through 16405. You know, I don't want you to get too bored, but just know that that is out there. And that's where you can find, unfortunately, a lot of really gray area for you. I guess that's why I'm here, is sort of to help with that. Basically, the Wyoming Sunshine Act does cover anything state, basically local entities, special districts, school districts, and of course the state of Wyoming departments and government. So it does not apply to the private industry, although with here, we're probably not going to have to worry too much about that. Essentially, Public Records Act lists anything to be public as information obtained in any sort of form anymore. They used to say just paper or paper electronic, but of course, it's become more of a text messages, video content, any of that sort of thing obtained in the furtherance of essentially the official functioning of the state entity, in this case, the local school district. And it can be written communication or other information received, unless it's, of course, privileged or confidential by law. And I think as we're going through here, we're going to talk on the first portion again, sort of the state version at the public level. I would argue that parents are both public and the person of interest when it comes to the FERPA federal aspect. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're going through here. Sunshine Law still does apply, but I suspect most of your questions could come with FERPA. Just know that you get to double dip, so to speak, with records requests between these two. With regard to the Public Records Act, they are required to provide some notification or acknowledgement of your records request within 7 business days. And generally speaking, they are to look through there and determine, what they think they might have access to and what they don't. That's not always possible based on some workloads and that sort of thing that everyone kind of experiences, unfortunately. But that is, that is the law within 7 business days. So they should have at least said, hey, I'm in, the process of reviewing. We have it. I promise I'll get back to you, that sort of thing, and have ongoing conversations about that. If it's available very easily, the recommendation, as far as the law goes, I guess it's more than a recommendation, quite frankly, is that it's produced. And there should be sort of, if it's going to be, right now, as it stands, local entities have their own fee schedule associated with producing records. Hopefully, most of them are easy peasy, lemon squeezy, if you will, and they can just be provided for free. I think we get into some issues when there is a records request that's pretty extensive. And I'll get some more information to you later on in the presentation about that. But at that point, they have 30 calendar days from the date of the acknowledgement to produce the records, unless there has been some ongoing communications about any delays that might prevent that, and those sort of things. I can tell you sometimes the holdups are legal, having to go over things. They take a little bit longer. So I'm just going to preface with that. When you reach out, let me start over. The Public Records statutes indicate that every governmental entity in Wyoming must provide their records designee on the Wyoming Department of A&I website. And from there is a bear with me. There is a database that one can go to and put in the specific perimeters of whom you're looking for and get that designee. I can't tell you the number of folks that have just reached out to various people that they believe are probably the designee, and they don't turn out being that person. And either it's got lost in their emails, or someone else has received it and didn't know what to do with it, so it didn't get transferred on. But making sure that you are actually requesting public records from the appropriate person is so important. Otherwise, I think a lot of us get stuck in the limbo cycle. Well, who do I contact? And that sort of thing. So just setting yourself up from the first point of contact, making sure it's the right one, I think alleviates a lot of some of the frustration that can go on with that. And later on, I will provide that link to that website so that you have it. Also, with the Wyoming Public Records Act, entities must provide electronic records in an alternative format if requested by the requester, but they don't have to they do not have to create or compile any new data, extract data, or create new documents in regard to your public records request. Some of the official public records that we all associate are vouchers, receipts, documents, validating transactions involving public records, agreements and contracts, claims filed against an agency, records, correspondence, internal administrative documents and reports. This is where it gets a little bit sticky with regard to the FERPA aspect. So I just want to get with there. As we're going through here, we try to keep it in the back of your mind that federal law takes precedence over or supremacy over state law. So the state of Wyoming can say, you need to produce this. However, if it goes against federal law, unless there's an exemption, there wouldn't be a valid push to get that. I have thrown in here something that I think is helpful for people to sort of visualize what is or might not be a record. And I'll just let you all review this a little bit later on your own. But I think that it does give you some idea of what is kept as a public record. The public, of course, can inspect and request copies of public records for reasonable fees. I think some areas still struggle a little bit about what that reasonable fee is, but as it stands now, the statute just references reasonable. Agencies must maintain a published fee schedule and clear policies. So when a parent comes and asks for such things, they should be able to back up the charges that they could potentially be charging the parent. Of course, if you're in a very small, remote school district, I can't imagine this would happen with you, but if for some reason you couldn't make copies, the school district would have to make arrangements to figure out how to get those to the requester. And also, potentially, depending on the information that's being requested, there might be a possibility, unless there's some confidential information that would preclude it, but there could be a possibility where the documentation could just be reviewed sometimes. And I imagine in the school district arena, much of it is privileged or needs redaction in order to be prepared and released for review. Again, general exemptions are the disclosure is prohibited by state statute or federal statute or regulations. Of course, FERPA, HIPAA, social security numbers, all the things we think about when we talk about students, just making sure that while we're being as transparent as possible, that we're also taking into considering making sure that the student's information is protected. Sometimes they have exemptions that could cause injury to the public interest. I think primarily those would be more so in the realm of, say, a police sort of situation where there's a criminal investigation, those sorts of things. But it's kind of based on a case-by-case situation. Overall, there are 26 exemptions that could potentially be used, 7 discretionary and 19 mandatory. I think I mentioned before, investigatory records, they may be withheld. They're discretionary, so they could, or they may not. It just depends on the circumstances. Test questions and scoring keys, those are primarily in the realm of post-secondary, I would imagine. As far as bona fide research projects, again, that's probably post-secondary. Let's see, those don't really fall in for the most part. Mandatory, of course, are those things we've talked about that are PII or HIPAA, all those important aspects of a student's record, any disciplinary and those sort of things that, for the major public aspect wouldn't be released. So those are those mandatory ones. Also, library patron records, investigations involving unwarranted privacy invasion. I know that one kind of gets sticky, and there's caveats within the FERPA that I believe this would fall under as well. But we'll get to that a little bit later. A lot of this doesn't really lend itself as well to the school system. Generally speaking, if a record is being requested, and generally speaking, you want to have them be as transparent, as clear and transparency as possible. However, if there is a heavily redacted document, it may be entirely withheld, just because if you tried to make sense out of it, it wouldn't be useful or helpful at all. So it would potentially be just a waste of money if you were having to pay for those. Knowingly violating the WPRA can result in civil penalty up to $750. On the reverse side of that, if someone gives out information that shouldn't be, I would argue that that could potentially lead to other issues. So I think it's worth noting that sometimes we feel maybe a little bit that we aren't getting all of the information that we believe we're entitled to. And I don't know that I really don't believe most people are just trying to knowingly not be honest and transparent with folks, but they're kind of in trouble one way or the other. So they really have to balance what's going on in the situation with regarding the release of records, especially in a school situation. Let's see here. On the other aspect of things, there's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FERPA. And it's listed as U.S. Code 20, Section 1232G or 34 CFR Part 99. This is really Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act for parents and children. I think it's worth noting that obviously this is federal based in nature, and there are situations where once the child reaches the age of 18, if a parent were to request records on that individual, it's entirely possible that the parent would be refuse those documents unless there were special situational things regarding that student, because the student sort of ages out, if you will, and becomes their own person. Let's see here. So this is this sort of concludes just a general overview of the Wyoming Public Records aspect. Now, I'm not going to get super into the weeds with FERPA because, to be honest, I am not knowledgeable enough to cover all of those spots. I am not an attorney and cannot provide any legal type guidance, unfortunately, which hopefully you'll be okay with. That keeps me, non-biased and really thoughtful about things from a parent's point of view as well as the other side as well. But as we're going through here is one of the links to specifically review all of the FERPA information. And earlier I was talking about that, the Public Records Act does cover the aspect of what records are available to be provided. But there's also another mechanism when a parent feels like they're not getting things done, getting records done the way they had hoped, or they're feeling like they're not being heard, or that sort of thing. There is another avenue. Again, because I only have the ability to handle state things, this would be a U.S. Department of Education assistance kind of opportunity for a parent. Now, hopefully it never gets to that point, and I know struggles are very high and hard right now, but this would be an alternate availability for assistance specific. Let's see here. So I know that I was working with WDE last week, and there used to be some training videos specific to parents on the U.S. Department of Ed website. Now, I've struggled to find those, but I do know that there are lots of handouts and that sort of thing that would be most useful to you all. Let's see. Let me just switch some screens here. Okay. And the one that I'm thinking of is the Parent Guide to Family Educational Rights Act in FERPA. Let's see if it's going to come up for me. Are you guys seeing it at all? Okay, thank you, Leslie. So this goes through sort of what you should expect as far as FERPA goes. Again, that's at the federal level. So I could not compel a school district to release anything with regard to FERPA unless it's also covered by the state sunshine law. But I think the key here is that FERPA is very heavily situated on child and parent rights, where WPRA is heavily focused on the state general public aspect of records. Now, I think this is where parents should really, when they're requesting documents from a school district, it's very helpful to really look into it and sort of analyze what am I asking for? Is it more in the FERPA realm, or is it more in the state sunshine? Like, is it something anybody and everybody would have access to? And that would help guide you as to where you would start with those records requests, specifically to what you would be entitled to. I know that sometimes parents ask for things from school districts based on the Wyoming Public Records Act, where really it's more of a person of interest issue for the parent and the child. So I think that it's very important that you make sure when you're requesting this that you put under which one or both you're requesting certain documents, because under public records you might not be able to receive those. But as a parent, in most situations, you could receive a portion or all of those records. It kind of depends on the situation and what you're asking for, of course. And I think you have to keep in mind that the nature of what you're asking for. I think it's very easy sometimes when we're not entirely sure what we need to ask for, what we're really looking for, like we have an idea, that it's very easy to use big general overarching words such as like anything and everything. But I will tell you from working with a lot of people that either get denials or the request becomes so burdensome that it's really challenging for a school district to be able to provide that, especially in a really timely manner. And it can get very pricey. So if you can narrow the scope as much as possible, and be thoughtful about, okay, so is this just about my child, or is there something that there might be other protected folks within that information as well? Because if it's got something in there that has to have redaction, that generally takes a longer amount of time. Attorneys aren't notoriously known for how quick they are. They're known for how effective and how thorough they are. And so that leads to, as you can imagine, if you're sharing attorneys, you have to contract out an attorney. Those records become higher monetarily than they would be if it's a simple redaction and those sort of things. So these are some things to take into consideration when you're asking for the records. Not that I think that you shouldn't ask for everything that you want, but be cognizant of what you're really asking for if you can. Also, make sure as best you can that you work with a school district. What does this look like? Can you help each other pinpoint what you're trying to get at? I think that too is important. If you can start with the school district first, I think that relationship is so important. I acknowledge that not everybody gets along, or not everyone has the same idea about what certain things look at. But if we can find some middle ground, that's super helpful. And likewise, when you come to me with a complaint, I really like being able to help. But if I'm trying to work with two entities that I'm trying to mediate records for you on your behalf, and there's no wiggle room from either side, it makes things very challenging for me to be able to really mediate. And since I'm not an attorney, I don't have the power of the courts behind me to be like, this is what given the back and forth we've been through, which, the time consuming portion of that as well, if we're not very thoughtful about what we're asking for. Some are very good at it and others aren't. I think that this is sort of a nuance for many folks just getting through this process and what it looks like realistically for both sides. So if we can work together as best as possible to get to some consensus about this, I think it's a much better outcome for both sides, which is really what my position is about. There's a lot of educational pieces attached to that. as well as being a non-attorney. I have the ability to mediate records requests. I have the ability to designate timelines when they're having challenges getting together and really defining how acceptable a timeline is. I can do that. And then the other one is in extreme situation, I can say, I think we need to waive the fees. I will also tell you that while I have these three options available to me, I can also send that option out and say, okay, I don't agree with this at all. I don't think you should pay. I tell the school district, my recommendation is that you waive the fees on this because of this, this, and this. They may tell me that they're not going to follow my advice because I'm not an attorney. And at that point, I would have no remedy legally, and you would have to go to district court to obtain these. That's why I think it's so important that both sides work so closely together. And I'm happy to be a part of that, whatever that looks like. So I think we talked about a little bit earlier. I was listening, and there was some conversation about public records and open meetings. Now, if you're going to ask me to assist with open meetings, I won't be able to assist at all, unfortunately. I know they overlap a little bit, and you can't have one necessarily without the other, but that's outside the scope of my abilities to assist. That doesn't mean that we can't work together to remedy some of the issues in a different direction, that I can't offer resources and training. I am, for lack of a better way to explain this, I am an office of one. So when someone comes to me and says, I need you in your office to do this and this and this for me, I am happy to do anything and everything I can. Know that my process is not always quick. Usually it is not at this point in the game because I have such a high caseload. That doesn't mean I don't do research and try to reach out to everybody that takes the time to reach out to me and ask for help, because that's important to me. But just know that it's not going to be as timely necessarily as you expect. And beyond me, you're not required to use me, although as I have said, I'm very happy to assist in any way by school districts or parents. When I work on a complaint, I will work with both sides regardless, just so you're all aware. But it might not be as timely as you'd hoped. And then you're not required to use me. You could go, if you absolutely had to, you could go to district court, which I think one of the nuances of this position is that they sort of created this with the hope of being able to have someone to help that is a citizen or a product of. You can't be an attorney in this position. They want someone that's very civilian minded as well. And also attempt to not overburden the court systems with some of these things, if it's at all possible. Obviously, as a parent in school district, you have to do what you have to do, but I would like to prevent that for both sides, if at all possible. With regard to the FERPA aspect, now I wish that I could be more specific on that. I'm kind of giving you generalities and food for thought, but really I can't, it is not in my purview per se to make a specific judgment about that. A lot of that, when it is also statewide, I can work with, but know that there are extenuating circumstances that may prevent me from being able to assist you in that specific spot. There might be other aspects I can help easily. Know that one might be a little more challenging for me. And while I'm not an attorney, I have access from the AG's office when I have legal questions, because I want to make sure that any information I'm providing, including training mechanisms, that I'm providing you all the right information and as helpful as possible. I think the key important part of all of this is that there are so many nuances, and sometimes it's very specific to a parent or a child with information that they're trying to get. I can only imagine how challenging that can be, and getting to the right people. So I do think that there is worth in this. And I know there's frustration on probably both sides regarding records. I know that public records have been around a long time, and I still think that there are many entities that are still challenging to find a process that works better for everybody. And I'm also trying to work with the legislature to sort of narrow some of those scopes and think about some of the other things that apply to citizens and those trying to actually produce the records. So know that as well. That's kind of another a time management issue for me right now, is because I'm getting ready for interim. And so please do know that. I'm trying to think here, Leslie, what else do you think that we should discuss? Or
I just want to reiterate some of what you've said, Darlena. FERPA is a very old law. Excuse me. It was written in the 70s, and it was written before special education laws. It was written before HIPAA came out in the 90s. And there's layering like an onion, but also all of these laws were written before the concept of computerized records came up. And so those are additional laws, both state and federal, around cybersecurity and the way that electronic records are protected. And so it is very complicated, and it is very nuanced because we have all of these different laws that stack on top of each other, and they all kind of do their own thing. And so it's very important to have an advocate or an ombudsman like Darlena on your side to help sort out which law is the one that takes supremacy, and how they all interact with each other.
thank you, Leslie. I guess maybe we should take some questions.
That sounds wonderful. We will open the floor. Our media specialist, Jason Harper, is ready. If the audience has any questions, please type them in the chat. We'll give them a minute to respond. And if there's no further questions, then we will take a short break. I just want to say thank you so much to Ombudsman Potter and Leslie for the session. It was very informative, and we appreciate your time and energy. We know that everyone's busy, and yes, thank you so much. We'll see if any questions pop up for you.
And thank you all. I do not love presenting. I love talking to people. Generally in person is my favorite. So I do apologize if I seem a little off. This is not my favorite venue, but I will provide this PowerPoint to WDE as well.
Well, you did a fantastic job, and it is a little bit harder virtually and not talking to people. Oh, it looks like we have a question that popped up. Go ahead, Jason.
All right. We have a question. How do you know who the records person is?
Great question. There is in the PowerPoint that I will be providing, there is a link. As I mentioned earlier on, there's an ANI website, which seems weird, that the Wyoming Department of Administration and Information oversees. And there is a link on there with all of the appropriate designees' names in there. So you can pop in the name of the school that you're looking for, and it will give you the information for the appropriate person. Sometimes it's a superintendent, but sometimes it's just wonky. I actually had one that was someone in IT recently. I think Platt maybe, when I was trying to get it, and I was like, "Oh, that one's new." But yep, they were able to assist me with some of my questions, so that was great. And so that is in there. I know sometimes they post them as well on the school websites. I've been looking at a lot of school websites, and I imagine if you go through the WDE portal, there's a list of all the various schools with contact information, I believe. Is that correct? Leslie, is that still correct?
Yes, every school district should have contact information on their website, but it is also a requirement of FERPA that parents be notified annually of their rights. And it usually happens during registration, and that notification should list a person's name and phone number every year for you. And so it should be given to you annually with an actual person's name on it.
Awesome, thank you.
We do have another question here, and this kind of touches on what Leslie just said. So if that contact were to change throughout the year, is there any requirement that a district notify you of that change when it happens?
In terms of FERPA, it's once a year. Yeah. And so if there was a mid-year change, you probably wouldn't be notified right away.
As far as the public records aspect, you would be required to provide notice and give that information immediately, upon termination of the other one, so the people have all the updated information. And the school district themselves is responsible for contacting A&I, and the information that I provided should provide that to you as well.
We do have another question. Can a district or entity have more than one contact for the public records?
Yes, they can list as many as they need to. I understand that there are probably some special circumstances, perhaps someone with IEP information, that sort of thing, where they might want to segregate to make sure that they have the most appropriate person in the school district handling those. So yes, they can have as many as they need, but they must have at least one. And if they're going to have more than one, they should really notate the specific specialty area that designee would cover to make it more usable for, the parents and the public.
There are no more questions in the queue, but we'll just wait a few moments to see if any others roll in.
And thank you, Jason, for putting that link in the chat for the A&I website.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to move to a short break. Thank you again so much. And we look forward to everybody staying, and we'll see you at 3:00 sharp for our next session. It is Funding Facts, Understanding the School District Budget. Thank you again.
Thank you.